The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March. Uncle Tom had died peacefully in his sleep at the hospice facility, and someone needed to handle all the arrangements. That someone, according to my family, was obviously me. "Melissa, thank God you answered," my cousin Patricia sobbed into the phone. "Uncle Tom is gone and there's so much to do. Mom's too upset to think straight, and you know how good you are with organizing things." I sat up in bed, instantly awake despite the early hour. Uncle Tom had been battling cancer for 8 months, and his death wasn't unexpected. What I hadn't anticipated was immediately becoming the family's designated administrator for his final affairs. "What exactly needs to be handled?" I asked, reaching for the notepad I kept on my nightstand. "Everything," Patricia said, as if that answered my question. "The funeral home, the burial arrangements, the lawyer stuff, the house, his belongings. Mom says you're the only one organized enough to deal with all the legal paperwork." Over the next hour, I listened as Patricia outlined the massive scope of responsibilities the family expected me to shoulder. Uncle Tom had been a widower for 12 years with no children. His estate was supposedly simple, but simple still meant coordinating with funeral directors, lawyers, banks, insurance companies, real estate agents, and various utility companies. "When do you think you can drive up?" Patricia asked. "We really need you here by tomorrow to start handling everything." I lived 4 hours away from my family, in a city where I'd been building my career as a graphic designer. I had projects due, client meetings scheduled, and a life that didn't revolve around family emergencies. But as always, my family's crisis automatically became my responsibility. "I'll need to rearrange some things at work," I said carefully. "Oh, that's fine. Everyone will understand about a death in the family." What Patricia didn't understand was that taking indefinite time off to handle Uncle Tom's affairs could jeopardize the freelance contracts I'd worked months to secure. But pointing this out would label me as selfish and uncaring about family during a time of grief. The next morning, I called my clients to explain the situation and request deadline extensions. Most were understanding, but I could hear the disappointment in their voices. In the freelance world, reliability was everything, and family emergencies, no matter how legitimate, still meant letting people down. I packed a bag for what I assumed would be a week-long trip and drove to my hometown. I arrived to find my family gathered at Aunt Ruth's house, all looking overwhelmed and relieved to see me. "Melissa's here to save the day," Uncle Bob announced as I walked through the door. "Now we can get everything sorted out." The assumption that I would single-handedly manage Uncle Tom's entire estate was presented as fact, not a request. No one asked if I had time for this responsibility or offered to help with specific tasks. They simply expected me to handle everything while they processed their grief. Aunt Ruth handed me 3 folders stuffed with documents. "These are all Tom's papers. I tried to organize them, but you're so much better with this kind of thing." I spent the first day sorting through Uncle Tom's financial records, insurance policies, medical bills, and legal documents. His simple estate was actually quite complex. He owned his house outright, had multiple bank accounts, several investment portfolios, a life insurance policy, and dozens of subscriptions and services that needed to be canceled. The funeral home required immediate decisions about caskets, burial plots, memorial services, and payment arrangements. The lawyer needed to meet about the will and probate process. The bank required documentation to freeze accounts. The insurance company wanted death certificates and claim forms. Each task led to 3 more tasks. Each phone call resulted in additional paperwork. Each meeting required follow-up appointments. What the family saw as handling some paperwork was actually a full-time job that required constant attention to detail and legal deadlines. By the 3rd day, I was working 12-hour days while my family members went to their regular jobs and maintained their normal routines. They would check in with questions like, "How's everything going with Tom's stuff?" but offered no practical assistance. "This is so much harder than I expected," I told my cousin Steve during one of our evening updates. "Yeah, legal stuff is complicated," he agreed. "Good thing you're handling it instead of one of us. We'd probably mess something up." The assumption that I was naturally better equipped to handle complex legal and financial matters had become the family's excuse for avoiding responsibility. I wasn't actually more skilled at estate management than anyone else. I was just the person who said yes when others said they were too busy or too overwhelmed. Friday evening, exactly 1 week after Uncle Tom's death, I sat in his empty house surrounded by boxes of belongings that needed to be sorted, valued, and distributed. I'd been working non-stop for 7 days while my clients grew increasingly frustrated with my delayed projects. That's when I received the call that changed everything. Melissa? This is Jennifer Chen from Morrison Design Agency in Portland. We met at the design conference last month. I remembered Jennifer, creative director at one of the most prestigious design firms on the West Coast. We'd had a great conversation about emerging trends in digital marketing. Hi Jennifer. How can I help you? We have a senior designer position that just opened up, and your portfolio came immediately to mind. The position would start Monday if you're interested. My heart stopped. Morrison Design Agency was my dream job, the kind of opportunity that could transform my entire career. Monday, as in this Monday. I know it's short notice, but our client lost their lead designer unexpectedly, and we need someone who can hit the ground running. The salary is significantly higher than freelance rates, plus full benefits and profit sharing. Would you be available to start immediately? I looked around Uncle Tom's house, filled with tasks that still needed weeks of attention. My family expected me to handle every detail of his estate while they returned to their normal lives. Meanwhile, my dream job required me to be in Portland in 3 days. Can I call you back tomorrow morning? I asked. Of course. But I'll need an answer by noon. We have other candidates to consider if you're not available. After I hung up, I sat in Uncle Tom's kitchen staring at the piles of documents that represented weeks or months of additional work. Work that my family assumed I would complete because I was good with paperwork, and apparently had unlimited time to sacrifice for their convenience. I called my best friend Rachel, who lived in Portland and worked in corporate law. Melissa, you have to take this job, she said after I explained the situation. Morrison Design is incredible. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But my family is counting on me to handle Uncle Tom's estate. Your family is counting on you to do work they could hire a professional to handle. Estate lawyers exist for exactly this situation. But it would cost money to hire someone. It's not your money, Melissa. It's the estate's money. Executor fees and legal costs are standard expenses that get paid from the deceased person's assets. I'd been so focused on saving my family from legal fees that I hadn't considered the obvious solution. Uncle Tom's estate had enough money to pay professionals to handle his affairs properly. What if they're angry that I'm abandoning them? What if you're angry that they've been exploiting your time and skills for years without considering your career or your needs? That night I couldn't sleep. I walked through Uncle Tom's house, thinking about all the family crises where I'd automatically become the solution. When my grandmother needed care coordination, I'd managed her medical appointments and insurance claims. When my parents needed help with their taxes, I'd spent weekends organizing their financial records. When my sister got divorced, I'd handled her paperwork and court filings. Each time the family narrative was the same. Melissa is good at this stuff. Melissa has time to help. Melissa doesn't mind handling complicated situations. But I did mind. I minded that my career always took a backseat to family emergencies. I minded that my skills were volunteered without my consent. I minded that saying no to family obligations would label me as selfish while saying yes meant sacrificing my own opportunities. Saturday morning I called Jennifer Chen. I'm very interested in the position, but I need to ask about the start date. Would it be possible to begin on Wednesday instead of Monday? Monday is really what we need. Can you make that work? I looked at my laptop screen, which displayed my hastily rearranged client schedule and the growing list of Uncle Tom's estate tasks. Yes, I can make Monday work. Excellent. I'll email you the offer details and onboarding information. Welcome to Morrison Design Agency. After I hung up, I spent 2 hours researching estate lawyers in my hometown. I found 3 firms that specialized in probate cases and could take over Uncle Tom's affairs immediately. The cost would be reasonable considering the size of his estate, and the work would be completed properly by people who understood legal requirements and deadlines. Saturday afternoon I called a family meeting at Aunt Ruth's house. I have some important news to share, I began, looking at the 12 relatives who'd gathered to hear my progress report on Uncle Tom's estate. Please tell me the lawyer figured out how to avoid probate, Uncle Bob said hopefully. Actually, I need to tell you about a career opportunity I've been offered. I've been asked to start a new job in Portland on Monday. The room went silent. Mom was the first to speak. Monday. But what about Tom's estate? You can't just abandon all that work. I've researched several estate lawyers who can take over the administration. The costs would be paid from Uncle Tom's assets, which is standard practice. But we were counting on you, Aunt Ruth protested. You understand Tom's finances better than any stranger would. I've been organizing his documents for 1 week. A professional estate lawyer would understand the legal requirements much better than I do. This is awfully sudden, Patricia said suspiciously. How long have you known about this job? The offer came yesterday. It's with Morrison Design Agency, which is one of the top firms in the country. This opportunity could change my entire career trajectory. Uncle Bob shook his head. Family comes first, Melissa. Tom would have wanted you to handle his affairs personally. Tom would have wanted his affairs handled correctly and legally, which is what professional estate administration provides. The room erupted in overlapping conversations about family loyalty, responsibility, and the inconvenience of hiring lawyers. But underneath their objections I heard something else. Panic about losing their free solution to a complex problem. When would you start this job? Mom asked. Monday morning. I need to drive to Portland tomorrow. That gives us less than 24 hours to find a lawyer. Aunt Ruth exclaimed. I've already contacted 3 firms. All of them can meet with you Monday morning to discuss taking over the estate administration. But what if they charge too much? Patricia worried. Then you'll need to decide whether professional estate management is worth the cost, or whether one of you wants to take over the administrative work. The suggestion that someone else in the family might handle Uncle Tom's affairs was met with immediate protests. Everyone was too busy, too stressed, too unfamiliar with legal processes. But none of them were willing to pay for professional help either. I'll stay through the funeral on Monday morning, I offered. But I need to leave immediately after the service to drive to Portland. Sunday was spent in frantic phone calls between family members, trying to decide whether to hire one of the lawyers I'd contacted or attempt to persuade me to stay longer. I used the day to organize all of Uncle Tom's documents and create detailed notes about the estate's status for whoever would take over. Monday morning, I dressed for Uncle Tom's funeral while my packed car sat ready in Aunt Ruth's driveway. The service was scheduled for 10 a.m., followed by burial at 11:30. I needed to be on the road by noon to reach Portland in time for Tuesday morning meetings. The funeral was beautiful. Uncle Tom had been well loved in the community, and the church was filled with people sharing memories of his kindness and humor. During the service, I felt genuine grief for losing him and guilt about the timing of my departure. But as we gathered at the graveside for the burial, Mom made an announcement that crystallized my decision. I want everyone to know that Melissa will be handling all of Uncle Tom's legal affairs. She's good with paperwork and has time to manage everything properly. My family members nodded approvingly, as if my role as estate administrator had been decided by community consensus rather than voluntary agreement. No one mentioned that I'd tried to resign from this responsibility or that professional alternatives existed. Melissa will make sure everything gets sorted out correctly, Aunt Ruth added. We're so grateful to have someone reliable to handle all the complicated legal stuff. I stood at Uncle Tom's grave, listening to my family publicly assign me responsibilities I'd explicitly declined, and realized that nothing I said would change their expectations. They needed someone to sacrifice their time and energy for family convenience, and they'd decided that person was me. As the minister concluded the burial service and family members began offering condolences and making plans for the reception, I quietly stepped back from the group. I walked to my car, started the engine, and drove away from the cemetery while my family gathered around Uncle Tom's grave, still discussing all the estate work that needed to be completed. My phone started ringing before I reached the highway. I turned it off and focused on the 6-hour drive to Portland and my new life. I checked into a hotel Sunday evening and spent the night preparing for my first day at Morrison Design Agency. Tuesday morning, I walked into their offices wearing my best professional attire and ready to focus entirely on my career for the first time in years. My supervisor, Marcus, gave me a tour of the facilities and introduced me to my new team. We're so excited to have you here, Melissa. Your portfolio really impressed everyone. For the first time in months, I was valued for my professional skills rather than my willingness to handle other people's responsibilities. Wednesday evening, I finally turned my phone back on. The voicemail box was full, and the text messages required 20 minutes to read completely. The progression told a familiar story. Monday 2 p.m. Where did you go? We need to discuss the estate lawyer. Mom. Monday 4 p.m. Melissa, call me back immediately. This is urgent. Aunt Ruth. Monday 6 p.m. We met with the lawyer. He wants $5,000 to handle everything. That's ridiculous. Uncle Bob. Tuesday 8 a.m. We decided to handle Tom's estate ourselves. Can you walk us through what you've already done? Patricia. Tuesday 11 a.m. The bank won't talk to us without proper documentation. We need your help. Mom. Tuesday 2 p.m. This is much more complicated than we thought. Please call back. Aunt Ruth. Tuesday 5 p.m. We're going to hire the lawyer after all. Can you send him your notes? Patricia. Wednesday 10 a.m. Lawyer says you did excellent work organizing everything. He can finish from here. Uncle Bob. Wednesday 1 p.m. We should have supported your career opportunity. Sorry for being selfish. Mom. I forwarded my detailed estate notes to the lawyer and sent a group text to my family. Glad you found professional help for Uncle Tom's estate. Starting my new job has been wonderful. We'll call this weekend to catch up. 3 months later, I received a call from Patricia with news about the estate settlement. The lawyer finished everything perfectly. Uncle Tom's house sold for more than we expected, and all the legal requirements were handled correctly. We should have hired professional help from the beginning instead of expecting you to sacrifice your career. How much did the legal fees cost? About $8,000 total. Which sounds like a lot, but it came from Tom's assets and saved us months of stress. Plus, you got your dream job, so everything worked out better than if you'd stayed to handle things yourself. 6 months after Uncle Tom's funeral, I was promoted to senior designer at Morrison Design Agency. My salary had doubled compared to my freelance income, and I was working on campaigns for major national brands. A year later, my family faced another crisis when my grandfather needed someone to coordinate his medical care. Instead of automatically assigning me the responsibility, they held a family meeting to discuss hiring professional care coordinators. We learned from Tom's situation that Melissa has important career commitments, Mom explained to the family. We need to find solutions that don't require her to sacrifice her professional opportunities. They hired a geriatric care manager who specialized in coordinating medical services for elderly clients. The cost was reasonable, the care was excellent, and no family member had to put their life on hold to manage Grandpa's complex needs. 2 years after my escape from Uncle Tom's estate, I reflected on how that difficult decision had changed my family's approach to crisis management. They'd learned to distinguish between situations that required family support and situations that required professional services. Most importantly, they'd learned that my skills and availability weren't unlimited resources to be allocated whenever they faced complex problems. The funeral I'd left early had taught my family lessons that staying would never have provided. They discovered they were capable of researching solutions, making difficult decisions, and paying for professional help when necessary. My career at Morrison Design Agency flourished because I'd protected my opportunity to grow professionally instead of sacrificing it for family convenience. The work I would have done on Uncle Tom's estate was completed more efficiently by someone with proper legal training. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to enable their learned helplessness. Sometimes leaving during a crisis forces people to develop skills and resources they never knew they possessed. Uncle Tom's estate was settled properly, my family learned to handle complex situations independently, and I built the career I'd always dreamed of having. Everyone benefited when I stopped being the automatic solution to every family problem and started being a person with my own legitimate goals and opportunities. The Greyhound bus I should have taken became the symbol of boundaries I'd finally learned to set. Sometimes the most important journey is the one that takes you away from situations that prevent you from becoming who you're meant to be.